So that's really where the problems really evolve from. So Rhode Island's problems do have a cyclical component. Clearly they're related to what's going on in the U.S., but that was just the afterburners. We have major structural deficiencies in Rhode Island. Not only economic structural deficiencies, and I've documented those for well over a decade. There's not a lot new there. We also have structural deficiencies in the way we're set up politically, and I think that has a lot to do with it. So basically, if you were to look at it were I doing a PowerPoint presentation, I'd show you a graph of Rhode Island's economic performance since we went post-manufacturing at the end of 1987. We've never been the same. We have clearly a secular downtrend. So what I've been suggesting, and I was kind of surprised because after I've given talks, a lot of people, I guess, hadn't thought about this. They talked to me afterwards. It doesn't matter how you or I view the glass, half full, half empty. The only thing that matters is the size of the glass, and that's determined by economic growth, our economic environment, and those kinds of things. So should we rename Rhode Island the shot glass state? I don't know. That's certainly one thing to consider. But I think you have to really look at Rhode Island's economic malaise in terms of cause and effect. The effect is all those numbing economic statistics you hear about, some of which were the stylized facts that I said before. But the cause is the way that we do things here. I truly believe that. And in a newspaper article some time ago, I tried to describe it using an economic term, but I view Rhode Island's situation as endogenous mediocrity. And what I mean by that is our economic mediocrity is a logical and predictable outcome of the way that we have and continue to do things. First of all, voters demand absolutely nothing of elected officials. And guess what? That's what they get. About half of our candidates run unopposed. We have paropic leaders who engage in due presumption, think linearly. We have a legislature that spends lots and lots of time, but it's not obvious what they actually accomplish. That's the definition, by the way, of very low productivity. And low productivity offers the possibility that there's redundancy and the need for downsizing. So what I believe there are major structural political changes that are necessary before we can really be the kind of dynamic and small state that we should have been all along. First of all, I think it's obvious after 2008, Rhode Island can no longer afford a part-time legislature. Clearly, it's not just the conflicts, and those are pretty large. But it's also because in the middle of the worst economic crisis since the Depression, globally we flirted with depression, and our legislature, because they're part-time, and I understand this, they had to go home, take care of their families. So meanwhile, everything spins out of control till they come back. We can't afford to do that. We need a full-time legislature. And because of their exceedingly low productivity, we have to dramatically downsize the legislature. I would suggest somewhere around 50 in total. That's something the political scientists can hash out. I think we need 4-year terms, so it's not so short-term, but a limit of 2 terms. We need turnover for all the people there. I think we also need to give them research staff, so maybe in our lifetimes they can actually engage in due diligence. I think along with this, to dice things up, we should give the governor a line item veto. Some of the other things, because we are so consumption oriented, as we will inevitably and sadly find ways of generating more revenue, whether it's taxes, fees, the things that Rhode Island excels at, basically. But you know, when we do that, we should earmark all of that exclusively to investment-oriented purposes, not consumption, not just dump it in the general fund. And because the general fund is the god of consumption-oriented spending. That has really got us into a mess. So with all of this done, there's still no guarantee that we're going to get better, but essentially what we really have to look at, we'll have a better basis to look at what is probably the most glaring economic deficiency of the state of Rhode Island. Contrary to what our leaders say, our labor force is woefully inadequate in terms of its skills. That's not anything new, and it's not because we don't crank out skilled people. We basically rent most of them to Massachusetts and Connecticut. So in the 1990s, Rhode Island reinvented brain drain. as Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. And that ironically then makes it harder for Rhode Island firms to get a critical mass in technology to get going. But really, with our very high unemployment, I mean, we're going to get revisions next Friday. The rate's probably somewhat lower than where it is now, although the decrease right now from 12.5 to 11.5 is not because of employment change. It's because of unemployed Rhode Islanders dropping out of the labor force. So basically, you know, what has been Rhode Island's way of dealing with the really chronic unemployment problem, the lack of skills of our labor force? Well, the answer is two things. Number one, let's postpone the requirement that we attain educational standards. And as we do that, let's continue to defund public higher education. So basically, it's a very out-of-the-box solution to how to deal with skill problems. And that's one good thing, I guess. Our leaders are capable of thinking outside the box. That raises another question, though. What planet are they on? You know, so basically, you really have to look at that. And a lot of times, a kind of whiny response, well, we're too small to be doing well. And I think that's ridiculous. Our size could be an opportunity. And if you really believe that, and I don't think many people do, explain Delaware and how well they do. But basically, what I want to do is just to conclude then with a possible way to help us reduce our structural deficits, changing our state's name and motto so we can print up new license plates. So I don't know if that'll solve it, but you know, for our leaders it might, because they're not going to look at anything. Anyway, so first of all, if you judge what our state's name should be based on the way that we manage our economy's fiscal policy, Rhode Island and Sisyphus plantations. Now, if you recall, Sisyphus is from Greek myth, where you have to push a rock up a hill. As far as it gets up there, it rolls down. So the rock is our budget. The top of the hill is June 30th. The bottom is July 1st. And so, you know, again, the persistence of deficits is really not a coincidence. What our leaders have been saying, everything is national problems, not ours. The state of denial, that would be good. I think also, which is still numbing, 39 municipalities with all the replication, rename our state Redundancy Island. I mean, I certainly think that would be valid as a way to do it, because, you know, basically, apparently people in the state must think that Rhode Island's too big for economies of scale to pertain. If we were to change our state's motto based on how proactive our leaders have been in dealing with the crisis, I'd have to say change the motto from hope to mañana. I think that would be very, very accurate and stuff. And what's really amazing, you know, Rhode Island has crisis management in hyper slow motion. I've never seen anything like this. We're heading toward a wall, and it's like, take your time. You'd never know anything bad was happening, and we're just really hurting our future. So in conclusion, I want to point out that it never had to be this bad. This was not preordained by what could have been. We never had to fall so far. We never had to have such a shallow recovery. We could have and should have done a lot more along the way. But the question I'll pose, and I have an answer at least that I can live with, is Rhode Island's leadership capable of systematic long-term planning? I don't believe it is. I need to be convinced that it is. And you know, in my PowerPoint presentations, I always point out that saying the word systematic to Rhode Island's leaders is not unlike holding up a crucifix to a vampire. You know. So I'll conclude by saying my greatest hope is a change in the intellectual level of discussion within this state. So someday when I say something, instead of the question being, are you being negative, someday we'll finally figure, is it accurate? That's where we need to go. Thank you very much.